and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight, and a particular thanks to Vic Marks for giving up his time. He very kindly is doing a reprise of the hour or so we had from him this time last year. There's a lot of ground to cover about cricket across the globe, and if I could ask everyone to just remain on mute, and if they could send through any questions or comments on the chat, I'll make sure that those get included through the discussion. Often people send through very good ideas about some of the things that they'd like to know more of, so you're most welcome to do that. But Vic, you've just been to the Champions Trophy, and I was just before we get on to the tournament itself, I just happened to be scrolling through my either X account or Instagram or something like that, and I noticed that you were playing cricket. And were actually on the street there getting bowled at. And was the magic still there? You're on mute, actually. Vic, you're on mute, unfortunately. There we go.
Okay. Are we still there?
Yes.
Yes. Well, to my surprise, I ended up at the Champions Trophy. I think it was because Stephen Finn couldn't make it because he was playing for the Legends in India and for a rather more attractive sum than going to the Champions Trophy. And then just to keep you updated, I think with his either fifth, sixth, or seventh delivery of the tournament, he either went in the back and the hamstring while Sachin Tendulkar cover drove him for four. So that's quite a nice way for him to go out, and it allowed me to go to Lahore and Karachi. So I saw that, and we had it was quite tight security, but we had a wonderful guide, and he took us. We had a day out and about, going to the fort and the mosque, and then we just happened upon a little avenue, little street, and where there was a little bit of space, and then someone had a couple of cricket bats and a tennis ball. So I grabbed the bat really and played a few. I thought I'd give them a bit of a lesson, something unusual. So I played about two forward defensives and one backward defensive, and they all looked on in a puzzled fashion, saying, "What the devil's that?"
I like the flourish at the end of each shot, which
Yeah, well, so it was but it was an interesting trip. Although, if you're an England supporter, ultimately, yeah, pretty disappointing.
yeah. Did
Um,
you? I mean, one thing that always strikes me about the Champions Trophy is that it's a little bit of a sort of backwater to the World Cup, and
yeah,
that is that fair, or is
but
it? Does it have a higher profile elsewhere in the world?
well, I think India were pretty keen to win it. But it is. I mean, I could name you if you really press me every World Cup winner without having to go on Google or go online. I couldn't give you every Champions Trophy winner by any stretch of the imagination, although I know England never won it. I think I'm right in saying that. I mean, it's virtue as opposed to the World Cup. You've got eight teams there, and it's over in about 2.5 weeks. Of course, the World Cup nowadays, the first few World Cups actually took 2.5 weeks, but now the World Cup is a 6, 7 week sort of bonanza. And it's almost too long, I think. That's one of the problems with the 50 over World Cup. It goes on and on and on. Um, Sometimes with a few meaningless matches on the way. At least this was short and sharp. And the players were committed. You know, the players were gutted if they lost or elated if they won. The crowds weren't great, partly because Pakistan didn't do very well. And then there was the bizarre scenario of India playing all their matches in Dubai, um, which they sort of feverishly denied was an advantage to them, but it probably was. You know, they got used to the surface there, which suited them quite nicely, and it was like a home event for them in Dubai. So it was not a perfect tournament, but it was an interesting one. Yeah, so, and I thought we could, you can draw a few lessons from it. I mean, it's a sadness, isn't it? That 2019 England finally won of the 50 over competition, whereupon they abandoned 50 over cricket, and we've looked pretty ordinary since.
Yes, and you'd hold our performance down entirely to the fact that we don't do enough of that.
Well, not entirely, but I think it is significant that we two things. One is that none of our best players play 50 over cricket now unless they're playing for England. You've got the youngsters will play some 50 over cricket, or the has-beens, whilst the hundred's going on. But anyone with any real ambition is not playing 50 over cricket at all unless they play for England. So there's that problem. And also, it's my impression that England especially thought, well, it doesn't matter. We don't have to play 50 over cricket to be good at it. We play all this 2020 cricket and that's more or less the same. Well, it's not the same. And I thought that was highlighted in this tournament that 50 over cricket is almost nearer to Test cricket than it is T20 for a lot of the time. And it's been very convenient for England, both the players who they don't want to play 50 over cricket because franchise cricket is what you want. T20 over cricket is what you want to excel at, and you can, have a good living doing that. So they're not interested in 50 over cricket. And of course, by their actions, the ECB, by structuring the game as it is, tacitly are saying, well, we're not that bothered with 50 over cricket either. So it's not a huge surprise. We're not very good at it. And I also think we had well, I'll keep going on this one if you like. Is
Please do.
we were sort of slightly flawed in selection. Most of the sides essentially played their test team with their test bowlers and indeed most of their test batsmen. And the sides that excelled, in a sense, showed quite a lot of old-fashioned virtues, which is that you make sure one or two people at the top of the order bat for 30 or 35 overs, 40 overs. And if you get to over number 40 and you've only got 3 wickets down, then you kind of revert to T20 and you can cause mayhem. So the best sides, by and large, they built a foundation and then went bananas as they can now in a way that used not to be the case in the last 10 overs where they get 100, 120. And also, I think, I was frustrated that I shouldn't necessarily pick out individuals, but there was Salt at the top of the order who would get 20, 30 or 15 balls, which is fine in 20 over cricket. But actually, if he gets out in 50 over cricket, it's not fine because you're starting to lose wickets, you lose momentum. Or a Livingston is very much a T20 player. I wanted more. Uh, I didn't want too many T20 players in the team. And I also, while we were going, our bowling attack was lacking variety. We had no finger spinner. We had 3 fast bowlers when pace on the ball was not really an advantage. And poor old Adil Rashid was the only real specialist spinner who was always under pressure to try and rescue the situation. Anyway, so we didn't do very well. But
No,
it'd be interesting. To be fair, I think I heard Rob Key and one or two others, even Baz McCullum, sort of acknowledged that we didn't quite get it right. And with that, I agreed.
no, I think Rob Key made quite an interesting statement after the tournament in that he said, in an ideal world, you'd like as many players from your test team and your limited overs teams as well, which is essentially what
Yeah.
you've been saying there. Is that realistic, or in the context of England? And now they've got a new coach, the same coach as the Test cricket team.
Well, it's a real problem to manage the 3 format players. But I suppose if you're looking at clinically, I mean, Root is one of our, absolute world class, all time great. But he doesn't have to play in our T20 team, so you can do that. Stokes would obviously be in our 50 over team if he was fit and available. In fact, he's probably a better 50 over player than T20 now, I guess. And he's one of the ones who actually would bat time when you're aching for someone to bat time. He's done that quite a lot. So it is a juggling act, partly because certainly last calendar year, England played far more test matches than anyone else. So the players are busier. So it is a very tricky balancing act. But I think they need to differentiate a bit more between T20 and 50 over cricket if they want to be good at 50 over cricket. I mean, the World Cup was still quite a way away, I suppose. So we'll see how they go about it. But it was frustrating, I thought, because
And
we had 2 close games, but we didn't look like winning them.
So you typically want a better balanced attack and not just rely on the sheer pace that they were thinking was going to do the damage.
Yeah, well, I think so. I mean, I'm not really beating the drum for the finger spinners, but the finger spinners Bracewell of New Zealand, who's not, a terrifying finger spinner, but he was effective, as was Santner, not to mention, Jadejas and Axar Patel. So England, I thought, were a bit tunnel visioned. We're going to have quick bowlers and wrist spinners because that's what you do in one day cricket now. Well, I'm not sure that was the case, particularly on these sort of dry, quite easy to bat on in some ways, surfaces, but not much pace and just held a little bit. We didn't have any options really.
And it turned out that the pace bowlers went for the most runs per over. I think they were averaging over
Yeah.
10 and over off them in
Well,
some of the games. Yeah.
my other thought about it, actually, I don't want to get too grumpy, is that, we've got people like Archer coming back and maybe Jamie Overton and one or two others, where Archer in particular, I don't think he's bowled 10 overs in a day for probably, half a decade. And I got the impression that he would bowl a good spell, uh, and then he would come back. It's always difficult coming back, I know, in these one day games. And it was almost as if he didn't have the powers of concentration to get through 10 overs being totally on his game because for a good reason, he's not used to it. He hasn't done it for ages. I mean, we talk about the Ashes and think, oh, Archer, that'd be great. And one or two others like that would. I mean, I can't at the moment. I can't see Archer. If you're in the Test team, you've got to bowl 15 minimum overs a day, possibly 20 in the ideal world. That's a huge leap for him to make just at the minute. So I'm just a bit worried we're in this like Cleo Cuckoo land about how we can go about the Ashes with all these wonderful fast bowlers when dear old Mark Wood is injured out for the summer. Archer is blessed with, great talent and great hopes, but he hasn't really played a red ball game for 7 or 8 years or something like that, or 5 or 6 years. So anyway, I think I'm being appropriately gloomy at the moment, inappropriately gloomy, perhaps.
Not at all. I think most people would agree with you about Livingston and Salt. They didn't really make the impact they should. I think Salt appeared to be trying to smash everything right from the off, which it didn't pay off really. So I think you'd probably think there'd be a few changes now. And what about the captaincy? Would you see
Oh, right.
Harry Brook being the person to take the white ball team on, or
It is a puzzle. I mean, they've talked. They haven't ruled out Stokes, obviously. Um, I suppose Brook would then be a three format player, which is a slight problem. I think they could easily perhaps split up 50 and 20 over cricket. That might help them out. I had a sudden thought that even though he's not in the team, whether Ollie Pope should be a candidate for 50 over cricket, I don't know. At least he's got a little bit of experience and he's not in the T20 team. I don't know what they'll do. I mean, it sounds like McCullum were quite keen on Stokes. Of course, you can kind of, if you thought Stokes would get to the next World Cup, you'd just sort of temper him along, not have him playing too often. But I'm not sure his body's going to be up to it, to doing too much. So I'm not quite sure where they go.
there was an interesting article in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago by Simon Wilde, and he was suggesting that Crawley and Pope might not now fit into the Test team, and one of them should therefore end up being the captain of the 50 over team.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah, although I mean, one feature of the McCullum regime, which is in complete contrast to what probably I was used to, is that they hate dropping people. Um, and the more they fail, the more determined they are to keep them in the team. And I suspect when we turn up for, I think the first test against Zimbabwe this summer, I suspect Crawley will be there.
Hmm.
Partly because actually Crawley against the Australians in Australia last time round, he looked the part there. Obviously, he hasn't looked the part in recent times. There is a issue with Pope, I guess, looking at the test side, if everyone's fit, because Bethel came in and looked the part at number three. Pope is the vice captain. So I don't know who you leave out to get Pope in the team, unless you make him keep wicket, but I don't think you want to do that on a permanent basis. So there is a puzzle that might be saved by a little broken finger somewhere.
Yeah.
They've got six batsmen for five slots just at the minute, uh, on the basis that they don't actually ever drop Crawley. um,
I suppose that's a
and he
good
is a specialist
problem
opening
to have. Yeah.
batsman. So if
Yeah.
you drop Crawley, you've got to pick another opening batsman rather than Pope, probably.
He,
Um,
I know, I think someone again, I can't remember who it was writing about when people get to 50 plus test matches, which I think Pope and Crawley have both had, their
yeah.
average tends not to get any better. So
Oh,
these
right.
statistics prove. So
Uh,
that'll be
well,
interesting to see if they can disprove that. But well,
yeah,
30
yeah.
and 34, I think it is, isn't it?
Uh, 30 and 34, is it?
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, I can think of one who definitely got better, although I can't give you chapter and verse just to cheer him up, which must be Gooch, um,
yeah.
um, and possibly Gatting. Um, oh, right, I didn't know that stat, though.
No. Well,
But I
I
think
mean,
they'll worry about that.
they're both young, very young to have got to 50 test matches, I would have
Yeah,
thought.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
no,
But I mean, Crawley has gone through a nightmarish. I mean, Matt Henry to Crawley has not been a
mm,
pleasant contest for people in England or Kent.
no, absolutely. So, I've just got a couple of comments from Graham Monday. Just he says he was you were lucky you weren't playing Vic. He says, but also he suggested that James Vince and Liam Dawson came in for Salt and Livingston, which might suggest a slight Hampshire bias. But
Well, yeah. Well, I think even they have mentioned. I think I've heard Rob Key say, not Livingston, Dawson might have been handy. They've had a funny relationship with Dawson because they partly didn't pick him for that Indian tour, I think, because he had this lucrative contract in South Africa and he was not sure himself whether it was worth his while to abandon that contract to probably carry the drinks, so it seemed in India. But Dawson, if you were picking, Dawson would have been a huge asset during the Champions Trophy, bowling his left arm spin, which he's done well for Hampshire. Vince is an interesting one, isn't it? For a variety of reasons, because he's taking up residence in Dubai and
mm,
he's become a white ball cricketer, full stop, which is a trend that will probably increase. And yet he's someone who he might have played 40 or 50 test matches. We've seen him sort of threaten, but that's not going to
mm.
happen.
No, how interesting. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Somerset now. You just failed to win the championship in 2024. Can you see them getting to the pinnacle this year, or Surrey just too good? You've got Matt Henry, of course, for half the season.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they were very pleased to get a hold of him again. Um, he actually wasn't fit for the final of the Champions Trophy. Um, but they were delighted that he came to us. Not, I can tell you, because we were the highest bidders. Um, but he enjoyed it. More importantly, I think his family enjoyed it down at Taunton, and he's under. So he was terrific when he was around 2 years ago. Kind of took the pressure off Craig Overton, but was just wonderful in the dressing room and just a incredibly good influence and performed superbly. So that's a big plus, and he's there for at least seven championship matches and some of the T20s, I think, provided he stays fit. Um, I mean, we'd have to play really well. Surrey are strong, and then someone comes who you don't necessarily anticipate. We all start on 0 points, and we're looking forward to it. It is Somerset's, without getting too parochial, it's Somerset's 150th
Mm.
anniversary. Therefore, we thought it'd be quite appropriate if we could just walk off with the championship this year. But I don't think they'll be taking anything for granted. But there was one or two interesting things to pick up from Somerset. I think Tom Banton had a very good year last year and ended up in the Champions Trophy squad, but also scored red ball runs. And it's quite interesting to see how Will Smead now, who's never played a red ball game, but is obviously very gifted hitter a cricket ball, has looked on, I think, and watched how Tom Banton played in championship cricket, and therefore, when it came round to the blast or maybe the 100, he was kind of in the groove. And it seemed to be a great help to him to be a regular championship player and to spend time in the middle. Helped his one day game as well. And I'm just wondering and suspecting that Will Smeed has looked on because there's nothing worse than being a one day player out of nick in T20. You've got no time to sort of try and get it all back. You haven't got any time to play three or four, five deliveries just to try and get into rhythm again. So you need to do that before you get to those T20 matches. So it'll be interesting, first of all, how Will Smith goes, whether he plays in that first team. He may not get picked, but it's interesting that he's available and keen to try and find the magic again via playing some red ball cricket.
Yes, his quote was that he signed the red ball contract because he wanted to play more cricket.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
So that
yeah,
was a very interesting thing, given his previous stance, which was to become a sort of a global trotting
yeah.
limited over cricketer.
And I
Yeah.
think perhaps the absence of much cricket, he obviously played in our second team a little bit, was a handicap for him. And he's
Yeah.
come to that conclusion and try a different route now. We'll
One of
see.
the Cricket Society events down in the southwest was when Stephen Chalk interviewed Jamie Cox, and
Ah,
he made Smead's signing of the red ball contract hadn't been made public there, but he did imply that that might happen. But he made a really interesting point in that he said one of the things that frustrated him at Somerset had been the lack of a stable opening batting partnership, and he was quite forthright about it, saying, there's a number of people who could do it, but no one seems to really want to nail it down and do it long term.
yeah, I mean, it is more difficult. I mean, Jamie, of course, opened the batting.
Mm.
And it is more difficult at the top of the order by and large because the ball tends to move more. And, a lot of cricketers don't like going up there because of that reason. There are some though who hate the waiting and love to know exactly when they're going to go out to bat. I mean, I suspect, without wanting to dwell too much on Somerset, one of our openers will be the probably 20-year-old Archie Vaughan. I'm not quite sure who the other one is, but it'd be quite exciting if it was Will Smith. But I mean, I think he'll have to show some early season form to get that job. And obviously they've had Tom Lammonby opening, but he did so well at number three with Abel at four that they're, I think, a bit loath to switch that around. But I haven't seen him lately, so we'll see what happens on April the 4th when they trot out against Worcestershire, I think.
And Archie Vaughan, will he be a regular in the side now, do you think?
I
For
would
this,
think so. I think he'll
yeah.
start certainly. It was a huge bonus to see him bowl so well. I mean, he's always been regarded as a batsman who bowls, but then he did so well in those two championship games down at Taunton towards the end of the season, where it did turn, not unfairly, but it spun enough, and he bowled beautifully. But I'm pretty sure he will be in the first team that's announced in the championship, and he'll probably be tossed in again at the deep end where he ended last season, right at the top of the order. Which is exciting. I think he's had quite a good winter off with the captaining the under 19s. And let's hope he keeps progressing.
Yeah.
He was terrific last year, particularly with the ball. So sort of calm, actually. That was composed.
It's very exciting, isn't it, to see a cricketer of that age coming through and imposing themselves in that way, having the talent to bat and bowl.
Mm.
Whilst I suffered in silence watching Surrey collapse, it's great footage when you see all those wickets fall to the spinners, to Leach and him. Uh, just so on the spinner front, last year you talked about Tom Hartley, Jack Leach, Shoaib Bashir, and
Yeah.
I just happened to see before we came on the call that Shoaib Bashir's gone on loan to Glamorgan now because Mason Crane's injured, so
Oh, right.
he's not even considered as the third choice spinner for Somerset. and yet
Well,
here
I
he
think he
is. Yeah,
is.
uh,
Well,
it,
I didn't know that. I should have
yeah,
known that, but
no,
I knew that they were looking at loan possibilities because it's April the 4th. If Somerset play a specialist spinner, which they probably will, but there's no guarantee, it's always been Jack Leach, and they have got Archie now
mm.
to help him. Now, I'm hoping that later in the season that you can pick a team that includes Shoaib, Leach, and Vaughan. Um, but it's a weird career Shoaib's having, and I hadn't spotted that he's going to go to Glamorgan.
Apparently, they're committed to playing two spinners. So Mason Crane's got injured, and they've got Kellaway, the chap who can bowl left-handed and
All right.
right-handed,
So they almost
and
got three.
so they've got three already.
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Well, he's got to play. I understand. I mean, I know that the England setup. I mean, it's an odd situation where the England setup are pretty categorically picking Shoaib, and Somerset just as categorically pick Leach. Um, and I think that's based on what they think might be good for them come the Ashes. They think that Shoaib with his height and extra bounce. Traditionally, left arm spinners have done very little in Australia ever. That's the thinking. But he desperately needs cricket and to get some wickets with a red ball outside the Test arena. And so it's a good idea. I mean, it's up to
yeah,
get him
uh,
playing.
and it looks as though he'll be in the Test side in Australia at the end of the year. Um, I can't believe they're quaking in their boots at the prospect of facing him, are they?
Well, no, but I mean they tend to go after uh, visiting spinners. I mean, actually, Murali actually had a modest record in Australia, so they tend to be very aggressive. It depends what the match situation is as well. They tend to be in the ascendancy, then they'll go after him. Um, but I think you need one. You need someone in Australia, no question.
So
Uh,
they could you see us? I'm going to ask you at the end about what your first choice lineup would be, but just on the spinning front, could you see England playing four pace bowlers and then having Bethel and Root as the sort of part-time spinners, or would that be uh, a admission of defeat?
I think I mean, I don't think it would work. I remember thinking this years ago when Atherton and Hick were making their way in the England team early on, and in an era when Atherton's leg breaks. One year, Atherton was the top wicket taker. He keeps reminding me of this. Lancashire in the championship. He took 45 wickets bowling his leg spin for Lancashire in the very early 90s. And the most phlegmatic man in the world then got a bit of the yips, I think, actually.
Hmm.
um, and then Graham Hick was a useful off spinner and did get some test wickets, but it never sort of flourished as a subsidiary spinner. I think it'd be an awful lot to ask of Bethel. And indeed, Root's got 70 odd test wickets now, which is, not to be sniffed at, but he's got a lot on his plate at number four.
Hmm.
Um, so I think the best attack has three seamers plus Stokes,
Yeah, good.
a fit Stokes, and a proper spinner. I would have thought.
So the best hope for then is Shoaib Basher gets plenty of cricket this summer, in both Test
Yeah, I
cricket
mean, I guess he'll play.
and in.
Well, I don't know. They seem absolutely determined to keep playing him,
Hmm.
and he's never let them down. But it's not been all straightforward. But I would have thought he would be favourite to play in the first test against Zimbabwe, and therefore favourite to play against India. But he is a one-dimensional. He is one-dimensional in that he's going to bat at 10 or 11. So he's got to contribute pretty significantly with the ball. Otherwise, well, they'll start thinking, hang on a minute, we could compromise here. But I'm not sure the likes of Bethel, they're just filling in. They are just filling
Yeah.
in. Keaton Bethel would just be filling in. So it's a slightly negative way of going about it and playing an extra batsman along the way. but it's a long way down the road, the Ashes, I suppose. But they've clearly been thinking about Bashir being suitable. His attributes are suitable to Australia.
Hmm. So it'll be fascinating to see how he gets on. I mean, actually, his record in Test cricket, if you add it all up, is looking not too bad. Actually, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of people will be very pleased with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Um, his record for Somerset is appalling,
Yeah,
but we love it. We love it. Yeah, we do love him. But it's just a quirk. I watched him at the end of last season
yeah,
in a match
good.
where Leach and Vaughan were playing, and he didn't bowl badly, but you could sense his tension in that he was the England spinner and he was coming back into the county side. And Leach and Vaughan were having more success, and he was, he was sort of searching for that magic ball and desperately keen to do well and putting pressure on himself, and therefore didn't bowl quite as well as he might have done, and didn't get any rewards. And you could sense frustration on his part because he's everyone loves him down there, as they do in the England setup. But
Yes,
he
it's a great
played
success
so
story.
hard. Yeah.
Hmm. I think he must find it frustrating, but on the other hand, he only has to look back a year and think, "Gosh, how on earth has all this happened?" So
Yeah. Well, he's got about, I don't know how many wickets. He's got 50 odd Test wickets
hmm.
already. He's only a pup. um,
It's good. So I'm now going to move on to the schedule ahead. Alan Hyam has sent in a very good message here. He says Jamie Cox at that talk said one of his biggest challenges was letting go of talented players because there aren't enough spaces in the squad. It seems that county cricket directors want to play fewer games, thus needing even fewer players. What do you think is the right balance for the county schedule? So uh, at the talk, I think Jamie actually was saying he really liked the fact that they could play 14 championship games. I don't think he was particularly proposing they cut them down. And he made an interesting distinction because he said in England, you know, we are a playing culture, whereas in Australia it's very much a training culture. You play less games and train more. And he wasn't saying either was better, but he just said he liked the tradition in the UK of people getting good through playing regularly.
yeah, well, I think you find that the Australians who've come over to play county cricket on a regular basis, they've loved it because
Mm.
they're used to a season. I played a season way back in WA of Shield cricket, and we played, I think we played 10 4-day games and not many one-day games. So there was much more emphasis on getting prepared, and you had bigger gaps between the matches. So you went hell for leather during the games. You weren't saving yourself for the next game that was just around the corner. So it is quite a contrast. Um, but I'm sort of with Jamie in that, well, particularly if you're playing, if you want 14 games, if you're playing half of them right at the start of April and half of them in end of September, you've got to feature in about a lot of lost time anyway for weather. And I still enjoy the championship game as I mean, it is another balancing act. As far as the structure is concerned, or the schedule, the thing that frustrates so many is, particularly if you're not a host county for the 100, is August. August, if you live in Taunton and you want to watch cricket, well, you've got about 450 over games. Uh, in which essentially Somerset's second team is playing whoever's coming, and if it's Surrey, it's Surrey's second team, and that's what you get. And it's the prime month to have kids watching, and Taunton is quite barren, really.
Yes, and I very much doubt that anyone strolls round Taunton in a Welsh fire shirt, which Somerset is supposed to contribute to.
Yeah, 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 they don't. Well, Tom Abel might.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does, wherever they are, do they? Probably. Um, so I think it's that age-old problem, isn't it? That the balance still isn't there. Do you think that I think there's another sort of some sort of review or some sort of um, question going to the various counties at the moment about the number of red ball games, and I can't believe any of them want it reduced, really, do they? because
Well, the
it's then
counties
the
like it. I
rocky
don't know
road.
about, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure. Certainly the non-host counties, if you like, the non-test grounds, the non-hundred grounds, they want their grounds to be busy. And they want their members to have something to watch to justify the memberships. And they just want it to be a busy place. So that's that. Um, but there is a conundrum. I mean, the hundreds obviously has had great virtues for the women's game, and now almost by magic, it seems to be generating all this income. I don't know. I don't still understand how it works, but they are generating all this income, which is all going to be lapped up by the counties, and they're excited by that. But it still leaves us with this dilemma. I mean, ultimately, but I don't know how they're ever going to get there. But ultimately, it is really a nonsense to have two short form cricket competitions in the same summer. Obviously, the best solution would be to have a championship cricket, a T20 short form, let's say it's T20, but it could be 100, but T20, a really one major T20 competition and um, some 50 over cricket, so we got a chance in the World Cup. But I don't know how they're going to get there. I really don't.
Presumably, it has to wait until the TV deal runs out in sort of 2028 or 28, 29, and that surely at that point that it'll just become a standard T20, a single T20 tournament.
Well, maybe, but how many teams? Because the income generated by the hundred at the moment is just got everyone salivating,
Hmm.
and a lot of it's going to be a savior for a lot of clubs. But it's a very volatile time anyway. It's an extremely volatile time where it's really quite difficult for clubs to plan for the future because they don't quite know how it's going to pan out. Um, I mean, I know, for example, that there's an issue about salaries that's creeping up because there's all this money coming into the game. Uh, and will the fact that you're 100 hosts mean that you can just outbid anyone else for the best players? So clubs that don't have a 100 team are a bit fretful that the 100 hosts will have the financial clout to come and say to your best players, we can offer you, 50% more, uh, with the tacit understanding that you'll probably have a gig in the 100 if you're playing at a 100 host county. So that makes the non-host counties feel a bit vulnerable. And I think how you cope with that, I don't know. But there'll be some non-host counties who will just be thrilled, who've no ambitions to have a 100 team, who will be just thrilled to get that extra revenue.
And the women's game has changed a fair bit now, hasn't it? In the sense that there are several teams coming under the auspices of the counties. Do you see that as a good thing? And
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, the 100's been good for women's cricket. There's no question about that. And they've been very busy. Again, speaking from the West Country, Somerset now have taken over Western Storm, and Western Storm is now will be known as Somerset, and they've done all sorts of work down at Taunton to ensure that there are enough. Everyone's got their own dressing room. There's a great, quite a reorganization of everything, a bit of building going on. But everyone's delighted that we've now got, a Somerset men's team and a Somerset women's team. And I'm thinking that is probably good for the game. Um, but it's also caused them, a lot of effort and replanning to allow that to work. But we bid and we were very delighted to get that.
and you've got Heather Knight captaining the team and Charlie Dean playing for you, so two very prominent women's cricketers.
Yeah, I think Sophie Love's still captaining the team.
Oh, she okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But Heather's from Plymouth, and we count Devon as
Mm.
part of the West Country, and therefore Somerset. And we've got links with Heather, and I think she'll probably be. playing, but when available. But I think Sophie Luff is leading the side.
Okay. And in terms of the way the England women's team played in Australia, it caused a lot of uh, angst really about their performance. The theme that I always see is that we're a fraction of the quality of the Australian team. We've got three or four very outstanding players, but the system isn't bringing through very many really talented people of international quality.
Yeah, I mean, this is not my specialist subject, but it was. I think it must have been a huge eye opener for the women's team out there, and they suddenly felt like a whole raft of England men's tourists have felt in
Mm.
Australia, and where the whole nation seems to be kind of overwhelming you when you're in Australia. And we've seen it happen with the men's team
Mm.
time and time again. England can go on tour, South Africa or anywhere else, and they compete. But there have been far too many occasions, the majority of occasions, they go to Australia and they get absolutely hammered in a way that doesn't sort of equate to the strength of the teams necessarily. And it's a weird place to tour because it feels like everyone is on top of you, and the Aussies, they don't like to let go. I think the Aussie women wanted to sort of emulate what the men had done in several Ashes series in recent times. So I think it was a huge eye opener. And of course, it's all part of the deal, I suppose, with, greater profile, more scrutiny, bit more money comes that extra pressure. And I think, they would have felt it in a way that they wouldn't have felt it before. Australia even if the opposition are not that brilliant, it's the toughest tour, I think, because you sense that the whole nation is not. I mean, individually they're all wonderful, but get them together and they're right on top of you in a way that doesn't really happen elsewhere somehow. So they had to experience that for the first time, but it's something that England's teams under Root, under Cook, under Hussein, all these good captains, they've felt that for decades. So join the club, really.
Yes, I guess when you're in a sinking ship, it's virtually impossible to stop it, isn't it? And I must say, I thought Heather Knight was very dignified in the way she
Yeah,
handled it because
yeah, it's
she
tough.
she had to say the same thing pretty much every time, knowing that probably nothing was ever going to get any better. And you only have to look back, as you rightly point out, to the last men's tour out there. And the image I have is of Ollie Robinson in Tasmania backing away to leg and virtually letting the
No,
ball hit
that's
the
right. Yeah.
stumps. And you thought, well, if that's not giving up, I don't know what is.
I know. And there's been, I mean, there's been, and that wasn't the first time. That's happened quite often in Australia, where the whole thing is disintegrated. Um, so it's a big challenge for the women to get it together again, but and indeed for the men. What always happens, the pattern I think with Ashes tours is we'll get to about September, October. Again, I'm maybe being a bit negative here, but by September, October, we'll be looking forward to the Ashes and we'll find a way of arguing that actually we've got a good chance this year because if so and so and so and so and so stays fit and all these things and then Stark's probably going to go in the and then come about end of December, I think, well, why did we sort of dispense with all logic and kid ourselves that we were going to romp through the Ashes?
You only have to see the first ball, don't you? And that
Well,
kind of
exactly.
dictates it.
Well, you
Was
defined, we've got so many Ashes series that have been defined by the first ball. Whether it's Harmison's to second slip, it's Rory Burns getting bowled around his legs, it's Michael Slater hitting De Freitas long off for four through the covers, it's Nasser, the great putting him in Brisbane 360 for two. Whole tours are defined by practically the first ball that's bowled at Brisbane's.
I can think of one time where it was a disaster in the first over and we managed to win, which was the Andrew Strauss's tour. I think he was out for naught in the
Yes,
first
I think it
over.
was.
Yeah,
That's right.
If-
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. But that's the only time logic's turned on its head.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Uh,
I'm just going to come to one or two comments and questions from people who on the chat, if you don't mind, Vic.
Yeah.
Morley Pecker says there's been some talk about the possibility, while the horrible hundreds on, he says, that the county's not involved and it might want a mini competition of their own. Have you heard anything along those lines?
I haven't, but then I'm not always the best informed. I mean, what I've heard Jamie Cox in the past, but probably in the distant past, put forward the notion that actually perhaps we should play some championship cricket during the 100, which might diminish the integrity of the championship, but it would at least be some cricket for people to play. And I've even heard the suggestion, which I don't really like, that actually not so many points would be available, but it would get the games going on at county grounds in August. Um, but I don't know that we need more competitions. I think we just need more competitions that are, have more integrity, if you like.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it would be lovely to have some championship games in August. I think
I mean, the
everyone
other
would
thing
agree
is,
with that.
I suppose, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Good. So, apropos of nothing we've been discussing, but Douglas Miller says nothing to do with matters under discussion. But what do you think about the IPL cooking a snoop at the laws and allowing saliva to be applied to the ball? It's a hanging offence in this country. And Graham Monday follows up and saying seeing saliva on the ball in the IPL might well cause some issues for umpires in club cricket. Need to contact my league to remind clubs that saliva is not allowed. There you are.
Well, well, Douglas has got that sort of left field mind clearly, because I haven't considered the saliva issue this March. It's quite hard to police, though.
Yes, exactly.
I
Well,
mean, a lot of bowlers I can remember just sort of automatically kind of lick their lips with their fingers just to, get them going. Perhaps it was saliva. Uh, I don't have a strong view on saliva. I don't really mind saliva, for heaven's sake. What's the difference between saliva and sweat? I don't know. Douglas will tell me.
I mean, there've been all sorts of dark arts, which I'm sure you've known about all your life in cricket, I would imagine, with bowlers.
Well, um, the most obvious one is, I mean, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy about ball tampering, really. I remember when Steve Smith and Bancroft and Warner got into desperate trouble. I mean, there's a very thin line between what they were doing and what was happening routinely when I started playing and in the 60s with picking the seam. For example, that's changing the condition of the ball. And some of our greatest umpires were brilliant seam pickers. I mean, not sure he's still with us, but dear Ken Palmer, I mean, he by all accounts, he's before my time, but he would be able to pick the seam one-handed as he walked back. And dear old Bill Alley at the other end, well, he didn't tap it down. He used to bite his fingernails, so he didn't pick it at all. We didn't need to because Ken had done such a perfect job. And everyone sort of smiled ruefully about that. And it was still going on. When I was playing, there were certain bowlers who you knew were, getting that seam up and getting the ball zipping around. And everyone thought, well, it's not legal, but it just happens. And then suddenly, a couple of decades later, it's the most heinous activity known to man. Um, so I don't know where that's taking us, but it's just a reminder that, it's not necessarily a modern phenomenon trying to fiddle around with the ball.
No,
It's
I'm sure.
certainly happening in the 60s and 70s.
And I'd be interested to know what Bill Alley and Ken Palmer's approach was it to when they became umpires. Were they as liberal in their thinking as they were when
Well,
they played?
uh, I don't know. I think Bill Alley once asked the umpires used to carry knives and things, and little pen knives to clean things out. And he once asked the umpire when he was playing if he could just borrow his knife for a moment, and then he started picking the scene with a knife, and he said, "Well, you can't report me. You just given me the knife."
Very good.
um, um, so yeah. So, ball tampering is not new. That's my point. And I'm so therefore on saliva, I take a fairly liberal view, Douglas, wherever you are.
Very good. Let's move on to the 100 auction and the implications for the game. Um, what do the counties do with all this money? It's got to go into the infrastructure, hasn't it, and coaching, and not apparently to the players, but that's going to be easier said than done, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if they. I don't think they've actually. There will be clearly there will be kind of restrictions imposed from the centre about how you spend that money, and I don't know whether they've actually worked that out in any detail yet. You're better informed than I am, Peter, actually, on these things, I think. But even if they have, who is going to be overseeing what has happened to this lump of money that goes into the coffers of a county? So it will not be easy to oversee whether counties are just buying up some top class players, which they could never previously afford, with money that is supposed to be spent on facilities or infrastructure or recreational cricket. It's a bit of a minefield. Um, I don't know whether I mean, it may be that we have a significant salary cap, perhaps for the first time. There is a salary cap now. There has been for a while, but only one county has ever really got anywhere near it, and you probably support it, Peter. Um, so the salary cap up until now has been fairly irrelevant, but that might have to come in. I know that there's been cases this winter of some remarkable bidding over overseas bowlers, I think, actually, where one county has come in, another county's come in and just doubled the offer to acquire the services of an overseas bowler in a way that would never have happened previously. But with the prospect of all this revenue coming in, whether you're a 100 host or whether you're just the recipient as a lesser county.
Yes, interesting.
Uh, so we'll
And
see how it works out. I don't know, but and it's one, as I understand it, it's one big lump that comes essentially. So someone's got to work out very carefully how because it'll all disappear fairly quickly if you're not careful. It's, how best to use it. It's beyond my pay pay
it
grade.
it'll be interesting, fascinating to look at the people who've actually made these bids. There's a number of people from America. There's some who are already involved with IPL teams. Um, I think I mean, most of these sort of private equity-backed businesses, the people that own Chelsea have bought the Trent Rockets franchise. They can't really expect to make much money out of it, can they? Unless the tournament gets some very impressive TV rights money in years to come.
Well, I guess, but I mean, this is not again. It's not. I don't understand quite how it generates so much money at the moment, but I guess the goal might well include A, connections with the IPL, permission for Indian players to play in the 100, which has never been the case, which will then maximize television revenue because there'll be a huge Indian audience once there are Indian players, if there are Indian players. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I suspect you understand these things better than I do.
No, well,
Well,
I
there are
think
lots of people listening who understand it better than I do.
one of the interesting challenges, I think, will be the IPL people that have the franchises as to whether they will actually select. They will put a ban on selecting people from Pakistan because at the
Yeah,
moment Pakistan players can't play in the IPL, can they?
no, that's right. And you'd think that would constitute a step too far, but you never know. I mean, the might is right in cricket. It probably always has been, but it's certainly true now, I think. You don't think, I mean, it would go against the grain if someone imposed that proviso. Um,
Yes, I'm sure the English Cricket Board can't possibly allow that to happen.
yeah.
They'd be made a mockery of, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
But I looked at what the Ambani family, who bought into one of the franchises. I noticed that the leader of the family had spent £600 million on his daughter's wedding. So this is small fry that he's investing in cricket by comparison. So in some respects, I suspect there's some trophy assets here that they're procuring,
Yeah.
and perhaps the prestige of being connected to English cricket and its history.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that, having Lords, for example, being one base is just a terrific magnet. I'm not sure Cardiff necessarily qualifies in quite the same way, but that will be part of the attraction and some of these, and the Oval, no doubt. It beggars belief to me that it is generating so much income, but it is, and somehow we're going to have to use it wisely. But I'm not sure. But
Well,
it's a puzzle.
it's a one-off payment, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I did read that people that hadn't got the main franchises were then interested in bidding for the smaller counties as well, if that ever transpired.
Well,
So,
there will be an
yeah,
issue um, over the constitution of a lot of clubs will start to come to pass. There are a lot of still, not all the clubs are members clubs now, but there's still probably a majority of members clubs with all sorts of weird and wonderful constitutions. Um, and there will be debates about whether these clubs can sustain that membership based constitution if that prevents them from getting involved with the megabucks that seem to be out there, then there'll probably have to be amongst all the counties a lot of planning to change their own constitutions, and the members club may not survive for years to come.
yes, very interesting. Well, we're coming up to our hour now. I've just got one or two interesting comments to relay, if I may, before we then move on to your selection for the
Oh my
Ashes
goodness.
team. The I apologies, Mr. P. Hecht, I don't know your first name, but says if Indian players played in the 100, would this free up English players to play in the county championship in August? I guess it would if we had any. And then David Whittingham saying, could be fool's gold, the payment from the 100, and therefore the decision by Yorkshire County Cricket Club to sell 100% could that turn out to be a good move? Question mark. Yeah, question mark. Well, I think that's repaying Colin Graves, isn't
Well,
it?
I think that's
Largely.
probably the case too.
Yeah. I'm sure that there was a little bit of that in the negotiation, and I think Nigel, being Nigel Hancock, being a very generous person, has also said, "Would you like to do a little plug on your forthcoming book?" So why don't you do that
Oh yeah.
before we come to the
So
Ashes?
that's far more interesting than the book my potential Ashes team, which I haven't really thought about much. Yes, dear listeners, just to try and keep myself from going completely senile, I've been writing a book this winter, and I expect most of you will be have read. This is going to be volume two of Cricket Captains of England. Now, volume one, or it wasn't called volume one, the Cricket Captains of England, is a wonderful book that I'm sure a lot of you have read by Alan Gibson, who I got to know a little bit towards the end of his life. And he was actually my favorite commentator way back in the late 60s, early 70s, and the most wonderful writer. So it's a foolish undertaking to try and follow the great Alan Gibson, but his book finished essentially around about the time of Kerry Packer. He was very grumpy actually with Kerry Packer because it meant he had to write a very quick postscript after he'd sent off his copy because Tony Greig got sacked very quickly, and he had to scurry around doing a little bit on Brearley and Packer, and but it reads as if he was a bit grumpy about that. Anyway, so that's what I've been doing on and off this winter, doing volume two of the Cricket Captains of England, starting really again with Brearley, through to Stokes, and also including a chapter, although I'm writing it, on our one-day captains, particularly those who weren't Test captains. And there's three or four significant ones there, probably from. Although I haven't, Adam Holyoke, I think, was the first kind of specifically one-day specialist captain, and then there's obviously Morgans and Collingwoods and Joss Butler. So, and it should be out and about, I don't know, middle of the summer. So that's far more interesting than my potential test team because I haven't really thought about it.
Well, I'll give you a steer on that, but good luck with the book. Richard Buxton earlier had commented, he said, we need two proper spinners in tandem. Think Lock and Laker, so Shoaib and Leach. And then he goes on and says, Wood and Archer are too injury prone for tests, which you'd kind of said as well. And you like the look of Crawley at the top of the order.
Well,
And
I
so
think they look.
how
I
does
think what's the point they like to look. I mean, I think dropping people has been underrated actually, and doing this book actually, I've written about Joe Root inevitably because he actually captained England more often than anyone else, and he has the dubious on. Well, he's won more Test matches than any other England captain, but he's also lost more Test matches than any other England captain. Um, why was I thinking about Root now? I can't remember.
well,
Um,
he'd be in the team, I'm sure.
oh yeah, yeah, he's in the team.
So would you put Bethel at three?
Oh yeah, no, my point was that
Yeah.
Root was dropped once by
Yes.
Alistair Cook for the Sydney Test of 2014. And he was absolutely stunned by this. Not angry at Cook necessarily, but his whole life was falling apart. And the next test wasn't until Lord's next June, and inevitably he scored a double hundred. So it can, and there's a long list of players who actually benefited from being dropped. I think Ian Bell did. I think Andrew Strauss did. Ricky Ponting was dropped and came back hungry. So anyway, I don't know. I mentioned that because of the determination never to drop Crawley, really. Who is, but I think I understand why they would want him in Australia in that he has the capacity. I think Australia suits him, and he has scored freely against that triumvirate of Australian fast bowlers. He has the capacity to take the attack to them, and that's what they want. But he does not need to get a few runs just to,
Hmm.
calm it down a bit. Matt Henry got him out with an orange,
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, but you'll have. I mean, I don't think they'll change their outlook, and I don't mind that. They'll pick Duckett and probably Crawley and obviously Root and Morris, obviously Brook. And if you've got Stokes at six, you're nearly there. Who bats at three? Well, I mean, I was thinking, what are they doing putting young Bethel in? And then I watched him play and I thought, hang on a minute. He seems to have something a bit special here. So they'll be agonizing how they keep Bethel in the team, or do they let him wait for Pope? Pope's been a bit scatty in recent times. We'll have to wait and see. And then we can't judge Smith on what he did in the Champions Trophy, but he looked all at sea in the Champions Trophy, but it looked terrific last summer. So you got seven there already.
Yeah.
Bowling is, in a way, more worrying to me. Um, they're still trying to work out, obviously, what the best combination is post Anderson Broad. And again, perhaps we shouldn't be too skewed by what happened very recently in the Champions Trophy, where everyone kept disappearing, and Atkinson and Carse and uh, got a lot of stick. Before that tournament, you were thinking, well, Carse has suddenly made a strong bid. Atkinson's had a fantastic start to his career, but they're all novices compared to what they'll be coming up against in Australia, assuming that the old triumvirate of Cummins, Hazelwood, and Stark are still fit and going. It's amazing how they keep going. And
And not
then,
not forgetting Lan, of course, who's
yeah,
keeps to
that,
go on forever.
yeah, absolutely. And and he always looks wiry and fit as if he could keep going for a year or two more. So that's where I'd be most worried because, we cling on to the notion that pace in Australia is the key, and there's plenty of precedents for that. But Archer will be a gamble. And you think if they take Archer and Wood, between them, they might play 4 Test matches, but that's about the sum of it. I think there were a few mumblings that England have been quite one-dimensional about the virtue of pace. But I know, actually talking to Rob Key in Pakistan, that the one bowler who doesn't satisfy all that their pace criteria, but who they are increasingly impressed with is Cook at Essex, who's not, he's a probably mid-80s at most bowler, but he's a skillful operator. And I think they should be thinking about a little bit of variety there. I mean, it was amazing when Strauss won those Ashes. They ended up with, well, obviously Anderson, but Bresnan was a key man for 2 Test matches.
Hmm.
Tremlett. It wasn't extreme pace. It was actually probably against a weaker Australian side, admittedly, but they used as their mantra the old Aussie thing that I remember hearing in WA many years ago, which is they probably had an Aussie coach as well. I think it's probably Seiko, wasn't it? Bowl dry, which is simple. Just hit the top of our stump, keep bowling there. Don't let them give them no easy runs. Put pressure on them, bowl dry. There's still some virtue in that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that
sure.
us all be getting the right bowling attack because I think they'll have an aggressive batting lineup, and whether they come off or not, I don't know. But that's the way they'll go, and I don't disagree with that. But how you get a bowling attack that is credible is trickier. And obviously, I think Atkinson and Carse are in the box seats at the moment because they stay reasonably fit. But they are inexperienced, and as we've just seen with the women, as we've seen many, many times with the men, there's a sort of special pressure in Australia too that they get under your skin more easily than anywhere else. So that'll test them as well. But we'll get excited by come, November.
Hmm.
We'll be conjuring ways in which they'll win.
Yeah, we all love that first ball, don't we? Even if you're
Well,
my big problem is not falling asleep on the sofa before it starts.
well, you can go to bed after the first one and know how the others are going to go, basically. Uh, I
Well,
mean,
look,
I think there was a first ball, wasn't there, in England where Crawley on the first ball of
mm,
I can't remember which Ashes series it was.
it
Probably
was this month one most recently. Yeah, he hit the first
where he
ball for four.
smacked it through the covers for 4 and said, "Right, let's get going then."
That was a very satisfying moment. Well, look, we've we're very grateful, Vic, for thank you very much for the
Thank you for
last
keeping me
70
informed of
minutes.
where Somerset's Ulster is going to start. I hadn't picked that
Well,
up, I'm
I
afraid.
just purely happened to look about 5 minutes before you came on, so I thought I ought to mention it. But good luck to Somerset this year in its 150th anniversary. And as ever, it's been an extremely informative time. You're a great supporter of the Cricket Society, and we really appreciate your contribution. So enjoy your summer, and thank you very much indeed. And good luck with your book.
Cheers, Peter. Thanks a lot.
Good
Bye.
night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.